So you actually have, I think, a really interesting perspective on this question, having come recently out of the world of HR, where you spent as an internal HR leader for years, and now into more of a consulting role. What, either from your experience internally or combined with your external experience, what are you seeing as kind of the biggest challenge right now that's getting in the way, or that companies are wrestling with in regards to creating a more engaging workplace?
I think what I'm seeing is with the added focus on the Me Too movement and diversity and inclusion, and there's this overwhelming need to rely on policy to drive some of those decisions. I think some companies are going completely the opposite end and kind of dictating some of these behaviors, as opposed to just saying, we value this, just do it, and we'll remove the obstacles for you to do it. Instead, they're putting in place all these different steps to try to drive people to the right behavior. I mean, it's important to hold people accountable, but the more rules you put in place for an organization, the more you're going to have people try to break those rules. And so I think companies do better when they just trust the people that they've hired to do the thing that they're supposed to do. So if you just state really clearly, here's what we value, here's what we want to do, and get out of people's way, I think you're going to have a much better result than this overly dictated approach to doing that.
So going sort of in an abundance of caution or out of fear or whatever, what I'm hearing you say is organizations sort of starting to add on more policy, add on more formal structure around how we're supposed to be treating or not treating each other. What has been, have you seen any specific, like, what do you see has been the consequence of that? Like, there's the, like, well, people will break that, but what are the other consequences of taking that path?
I think it forces people to sort of abdicate their own autonomy. So if you make a whole bunch of rules around it, a manager doesn't have to sit and think, what would I do? What do I think is the right thing to do? What do I think is the right choice? It's more of like, well, HR said I had to.
Right.
So there's that element of I've given up my power because of the policy. And I think it's an unintended consequence when companies do this, but it is a real consequence. It reminds me of back in the day when you were really overly prescriptive about dress codes, and it said no blue jeans, so everybody wore black jeans because, well, it doesn't say black. So when you start to get that granular, you do get that kind of nitpicking behavior from employees. So I think you just really need to let them do what they need to do.
It's interesting. So that is a pretty big barrier. I can see that being a barrier. That it's almost like it's a barrier that we had historically. We've had an abundance of policy, and it's sort of on blast almost in some places right now. And there's, I would assume I've seen kind of, there's two extremes, right? There's either the on blast, or you have the companies, which I think are the companies that more resemble, at least what I think you're suggesting, that are almost the other way, where they've tried to really minimize the amount of policies they have around trying to create more cultural norms or expectations and standards, as opposed to formal laws, I guess, laws and restrictions.
Right. Well, there's that element of what's legal and what's expected. So what's legal, yes, make it a policy. Right. We will not discriminate against XYZ. But the other piece of it is really around, here's what we expect. So Ritz-Carlton is very popular of saying, we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. That is a very open-ended statement. It is not super wordy, and yet it sets up expectations so much. We respect you as ladies and gentlemen, as well as we respect our customers as ladies and gentlemen. So it's such a strong statement, and it didn't take a 48-page employee manual to state it.
Right. Well, my favorite example of that on the other, from a client of mine, was dress code. Is it like their dress code now is dress for your day?
Right.
That's it, and they have very few issues. And so I just think about it. It's a great evolution. It's a great point. What do you think that leaders most misunderstand about engaging employees or creating a more human workplace? What is the biggest misunderstanding about engagement, do you think?
I think they see engagement as a program. We are now going to do the engagement initiative, whereas engagement's an outcome of what the business does every day. So if you're having struggles with people feeling like they're engaged at work, look at everything. Look at your policies and procedures. Look at your environment. Are they working in a place that's uncomfortable for them? Look at the tools. Do they have the tools that they need? So acting like engagement is something that 50 people have to sit in a room about and plan for, I think completely sets it apart from everything else that's happening in the business, and now engagement is their problem, right? It's this committee's problem, as opposed to everything we do impacts our employees' ability to decide to be engaged. Right. So that, to me, it's just thinking like it's something completely separate.
Got it. So when you were doing the work internally, trying to move the needle on engagement, or trying to help leaders or managers create more engaging teams, what were your, what were the kind of most effective either techniques or strategies or tips that you would give or teach to managers for how to improve the engagement of their team, or how to make the work experience more engaging for their people?
You really focus a lot on removing obstacles. Frustration breeds disengagement a lot of times. And also make it safe for employees to make a mistake. I've always told my teams, and I shared with the leaders that I would help develop, you can make a mistake. That's okay. Come to me, explain what happened, let's work together about what we're going to do next. But if you make that same mistake a repeated time, then it's a different conversation.
Right.
But I think so many people lead and follow from a place of fear. Sure. They're terrified to make that first mistake. And it could be something as simple as, I sent an email without copying you, I'm really sorry. But some leaders, because they're now worried about what their leader is going to say, react in such a place of fear that they overreact, and that breeds that distrust. So I just tell them, make it okay to mess up, but then give them that safety net, turn it into a learning moment, and then move forward.
Got it. Go back to removing obstacles. What does that look like? How as a manager, how do you advise they go about that process of removing obstacles?
So managers should remove obstacles for their people. So I worked in an environment that it was great work, loved what I did. It was kind of a difficult culture though. So what I would do is I was the buffer for the rest of my team. I wanted my team to be able to do their best work, do what they needed to do. So I ran cover for leaders who might come in and do a drive-by and say, hey, I need you to do this by the end of the day. Or I would fight the fight for them and say, we're going to go get that budget. I would get them the budget, and I said, you just keep working on it, don't worry about it, I'll go deal with that. So that they didn't have to worry about the things that were keeping them from doing their core work. I did that. I let them just do the work that they needed to do so that they could be successful.
That's really, well, and through, I'm assuming the devices you were using involved a lot of conversation, a lot of checking in, a lot of one-on-ones, like you have to be in that constant conversation, right? You
do. So it is understanding what obstacles your team is facing as well. So you do have to build that relationship with your employees so that they're trusting that they can bring those obstacles to you and that you're not going to overreact and blame them for the obstacle. Right. But there's also an element of understanding the company that you're within. So removing obstacles looks differently depending on what the organization is. If it's a very politically driven organization, then it's about playing the game and cashing in favors and that sort of thing. Yeah. If it's just a very logistic, cost-driven organization, it's about making the ROI and making sure that you can get the budget for them. So it's really understanding what the currency of the organization is and then acting on it. And a lot of times I would try to shield my team from those conversations. They don't need to know, right? And I wouldn't always win, and that's okay, but at least my team knew I was trying to fight the fight for them, and that goes a long way for your team to trust you.
All right, got it, helpful. Last question. I'm gonna hand you a magic wand, and you can, with that magic wand, you can eliminate one management practice, mindset, approach from existence in 2019 going forward. What do you use it on?
Oh, that's a great question. So immediately, 10 came to mind. So I'll try to edit. I think a big piece. Distribution curves and stacked ranking. Performance management in general is broken, and we know that, but that's an easy answer. If you had to get rid of one thing, though, let people earn the ratings that they've earned. Don't force it into some formula just because you only have a certain budget for your salary. If that's a problem for you, then take raises away from performance management.
Right.
But just people know the game that you're playing,
Right.
and so all you're really doing is driving demotivation with your performance management practices. So I'd say that.
That's good. And I think the other side of that too is that once they know the game, they're manipulating the game
Absolutely.
to get the dollars out of the system.
Yep.
So,
managers and employees alike, all doing it.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jason.
Appreciate it.